Hey guys, this is Paulo with Meditation Amsterdam. Today I want to share my thoughts on the extent to which philosophizing about spirituality can become a serious problem that both hampers progress by giving us the false impression that we are, in fact, progressing in our spiritual development, but which also masks unrecognized fears that we are better off bringing to the foreground, that they may be dealt with. And one of the things that comes to mind is what I see being discussed out there in the YouTube sphere, and the examples that I see in some lectures that I attend, where people talk about the mind and try to sort of borrow spiritual ways of thinking to underpin psychology and neurology and so on. And what I see is first of all a general tendency, which is natural, of us trying to conceptually understand what the spiritual endeavor is about, and having plausible reasons to engage in the whole thing and really wrap our head around what the process is like. Now, I obviously have no critique about that part, because that's what this entire channel rests on, and it's the purpose of understanding what it is that we're getting into, why we're getting into it, how it works, what are the pitfalls, what are the considerations. I think all of that is very valuable. As a matter of fact, we are trying to, in a sense, embark in a very if not complicated, at least difficult journey. And the shift in our frame of mind is quite significant to engage in that correctly. So that shift doesn't just happen, although it does for some people. But for most of us, we need to understand. We need a bridge from the way we normally think to the more sort of spiritual endeavor way of thinking, right? And that requires language. It requires explanations. I think that's not a problem. Techniques definitely require language. The kind of philosophy that I'm talking about is some of these dialogues that I see sometimes online about, can you explain emptiness to me, right? Or what is the difference between consciousness and awareness? Now, if that is being explained on a practical level, I think that's okay. But sometimes people get into these little quandaries, right? Like, it feels like a paradox that I need to, on the one hand, improve and on the other, accept myself, right? We get into these very complicated areas of mind because we're trying to resolve this on a conceptual level as opposed to an experiential level. When I work with people, the first move that we do is away from the conceptual. I spend 5, 10, maybe 20 minutes explaining conceptually, and from there on, it's really about the experiential and the sensory. We want to move in that direction. We want to reorient the use of our attention towards a place where it makes us have a spiritual progress. Yeah. So I see dialogues going to nowhere. I remember I used to follow a channel that shared content about getting to meet people, how to create romance and things of that kind. Was fairly interested in those things about a decade ago, and one of the things that they warned you about is avoid the half an hour conversation to nowhere, right? And so I think that in the spiritual sense, philosophizing about spirituality is the half hour conversation to nowhere. It gets you nowhere, absolutely nowhere. You can get answers to all those philosophical questions and be right at square one where you started. You've not moved an inch in terms of developing your mind or knowing how to do so, for that matter. And so the danger here is it's the blockage that this creates. Running around in circles with concepts and philosophy about spirituality without the rubber ever hitting the road. And worse, even worse, developing a spiritual persona around that and believing that we are making progress, whilst in fact we're just spinning our wheels and burning rubber, but really standing still when it comes to the cultivation of our mind-body system. So that's one element there that I think is worth pointing out. The other one is that typically this stuff is hiding fear. It's the mind is sending us on this wild goose chase, apparently for investigative reasons, but really most philosophy and mental or mentation is there to repress fear and not even make us aware that the fear is there. So people then start to ask these fear-based questions, such as, will I not lose all motivation if I become enlightened, right? I literally heard someone yesterday say that we have to, that the more we do, the more we clarify our subconscious and get rid of trauma, whatever, the more we have to, quote unquote, lie to ourselves to stay motivated and create false carrots that we chase to stay happy, because otherwise what would follow is complete nihilism and a collapse of, of our lives. And I think what you're essentially saying is that you're just afraid to lose heart by bringing all the truth to the surface. And my response would be to quote Angelo Di Lullo from the channel Simply Always Awake, highly recommend, fuck around and find out. Bring the truth to the surface and then find out what that does. And if you are afraid of hopelessness, then that's the very thing that you need to face. If you are afraid of all your priorities collapsing, then you are bound by that fear. And you keep creating these false carrots. And for that to be the big answer is, to me, a philosophy of despair in reality. To say that you need to lie to yourself to keep the show on the run. I found it a rather disgusting comment, to be frank. I was absolutely not impressed by that. It doesn't take a lot of effort for me to keep my big mouth shut in such sort of public settings, but I thought I would share it because it is a clear indicative of how many of our what will happen when my ego dies type of questions can be rephrased in the form of, I am actually afraid of X. It's interesting. The same person also said that if our ego was quote unquote eliminated, that we would become a kind of loose cannon that society would only make fun of, which could be rephrased as, I am afraid of not being accepted by my significant others, right? That's my fear. So philosophy and mental positionalities, as lofty as they may appear in the face of it, are very often there to disguise or help us in the active repression of fears that we're not ready to recognize. I don't know how alone I am in this, and I'm sure with the audience in this channel, I'm not that alone in this, in what I'm about to say, but I think that I would find much more resistance out there in saying that it is the truth at any price. That is what we are after, that our sincerity ought to know no limits, and that though the limits might be of a practical nature, in other words, I don't want to start fighting battles in the middle of seminars and things of that kind, or with my family or stuff like that. I don't want to create disharmony just to defend the truth, because the truth doesn't need my defending, but rather, can I acknowledge it for myself is the real challenge. You see, can I stay totally sincere in calling a spade for me, and inside, and recognize my shortcomings, recognize my lack of authenticity or whatever, and not to kid myself about these things, right? That's the general ask. And when we are trying to predict how enlightenment is going to pan out for us, we're just trying to appease fear, right? So why not recognize, I'm afraid of what this will mean for me. I'm afraid of feeling alone if my spiritual endeavor takes me too far outside of society. I'm afraid of facing criticism, or I'm afraid of facing the complete collapse of what it used to be my priorities, right? So, and not knowing what to do. I'm afraid of uncertainty. That's real talk right there. But to say like, gee, I wonder after spirituality, when the ego is dead, will I be able to? You're kidding yourself. You're afraid. Right? So just admit that to yourself, and rather than going into some sort of philosophical exploration of what it means, of what the ego is really made of, or how it became what it is. I was thinking to myself, if a kid could philosophize, it would start going, but how will I deal with life if I find out that Santa isn't real, right? Like how will I cope? How will I still behave and try to be good instead of being on the naughty list if I find out Santa is not there, and what's it like to realize that Santa is not there, right? How do I go about finding out, as opposed to listening to the voice that says just look at your parents putting the gifts under the tree. And that's not a philosophical exercise. It's a clarification exercise that answers the question immediately. Santa does not exist. It's the same with the ego. Observe your mind long and deep enough. Be sincere about when you're bullshitting yourself to the best of your abilities, by realizing when you create disharmony inside or outside, and the ego will be revealed as non-existent. How would you deal with that disappearance? Exactly the way you dealt with Santa not existing. It is obvious. Everything becomes like, oh, I guess nothing's there. Good, let's get on with it, all right? But with a lot less contraction and pain and disharmony, twisting yourself into a pretzel in the service of an entity that was, pretending to be in the background, deciding for you, and on behalf of which you were creating a lot of stress and anxiety for yourself. Right? It's not that mysterious, you see? But we make it so because we're trying to solve things on a mental level, anticipating what it is like, instead of being real and acknowledging that we're asking all these questions out of the fear of doing the work and finding out what's what. A lot of which has to do with fear of inadequacy, fear of loneliness, fear of death, and you name it, right? So some of these are very, very profound fears, and whoever says that they're over them and they're just like super chilled and live and let live, well, chances are maybe they are, right? But maybe the repression mechanisms are just tremendously effective, and they've never been confronted with the existential angst that's hidden underneath, which presents itself or uses as its PR agent the sense of self. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share today, is this notion of how spiritual musings are a complete waste of time, beyond what's helping us understand the framework of the spiritual endeavor, the techniques that we need to become familiar and put into practice, and how to, let's say, resolve hang-ups and resolve blockages to us engaging in that endeavor in a righteous and effective kind of way. So that's my thoughts for today, which is a Friday afternoon. Thought I'd share those with you guys, and curious what you make of them. I'll be back with more videos pretty soon. If you think that this content is worth liking, sharing, and subscribing, and actively participating in the channel, then do so. And thanks for listening. Cheerio.